Between the election and the time that the president leaves office, which will absolutely happen this time, that's usually called the lame duck period of a presidential tenure. One of the president's strongest powers is executive actions that it can take to implement regulations. So is there a cutoff day after the election when the current administration can no longer propose or make any new regulations?
Presidents can issue, or rather propose, regulations probably pretty much the last minute. They have the authority to do that. But the reality is that it takes a long time to get regulations through the process that requires public notice and all sorts of steps to actually get them done. And if they aren't done within a pretty long period of time, Congress has the ability to review them in detail. So you basically, starting the spring of the election year, you don't have a formal stop, but you have a practical stop in terms of what can actually be proposed to or at least started. So you're not likely to see in the lame duck period or in the formal transition a whole bunch of regulatory activity that couldn't easily be undone or stopped by the next president without really any changes occurring. So that's not typically what happens. There are issues around pardons, which often happen at the end of administration, that are different because you can't undo those. There's certainly efforts to put people on commissions, et cetera, and actually those things can be undone.
Speaking of President Biden, how can as he prepares to lead office, how can he and his current administration help support this transition?
Well, it's an important function of an outgoing president to do everything they can to help the incoming team understand what the state of play is. So President Bush, actually following 9/11, I think understood that his responsibilities as the outgoing president to assist, in this instance, President Obama as best as he could, was front of mind, and he committed his administration to being the very best outgoing administration, and he did, I think, meet that bar. Doing everything they can to get the next team ready should be the core objective. And again, this is all about how we keep all of us safe and make sure our country is operating in a better way for everybody. If that is the goal, an administration can do a lot of things to make that happen. When that's not a goal, they can actually put us at risk and create problems.
I would think it's also incumbent upon the incoming administration to reach out and coordinate with the outgoing administration.
It's the proverbial two to tango. You need both sides that understand what's at stake and recognize that politics needs to be put aside. And we've seen that work right. And I mentioned the outgoing Bush administration with the incoming Obama administration. It worked right then. And we've seen it work poorly. An example of that would have been the outgoing Obama administration, which was cooperative, and the incoming Trump administration, which was not as interested in getting the cooperation. And we saw the real challenge of an outgoing administration in 2020 with former President Trump not helping the Biden team get what they needed in order to be ready on day one. So we've seen all sorts, and we should understand that the people who get hurt are all of us. It is something that no one should be playing politics with.
As we mentioned at the beginning, you've been dealing with presidential transitions for decades. Are there any traditions that come with the presidential transition? And if so, do you have any favorites?
I think one of the traditions that is most important, and at least symbolically, is the incumbent president invites in the incoming president, and usually with their respective spouses, to sit down in the White House. And the reality is that there's probably not a whole lot of wisdom that is communicated. There may be, but I think it's frankly symbolic and ceremonial. But that symbolism and ceremony has real resonance, because it's a demonstration of the long-standing tradition in our country of that peaceful transfer of power, and the fact that we can fight vigorously during the political campaign, but at the end of the day, we're one country, and we need to move beyond that. And that governing effectively is not a political exercise, but an exercise of public leadership.
So the best we can hope for is that people will come to a consensus, do their jobs to ensure that the government has the resources it needs to protect ourselves and run the mechanisms that people count on every day.
I think the best we can hope for is that the American public consider how well a presidential candidate is actually going to run the government and not just what they promise you. At the end of the day, how they lead our government is fundamental to whether they're going to be a successful president and actually generate the kinds of things that we want as a country. So understanding that element of their responsibility really is important. And you want presidents that recognize that while they have an important job, picking their team is probably the most important thing they can do. And picking people who are values-based, fundamentally are caring about the public good and capable of running large organizations and working well together are critical qualities. And you want a Senate that is looking for the same things and is working to help the president get the right team and recognizes that delay is a real problem. It puts politics to the side. At the end of the day, we all we're all flying in the same airplane, and so having it crash should not be viewed as something that is part of partisan politics, but rather is bad for everybody.
Max, thank you so much for joining us. This is invaluable information. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to talking with you more, perhaps during the transition itself.
My pleasure. Thank you for engaging and asking these questions. This is a corner of our government that is not always well understood, but actually is very important.